The temple was silent now, its halls empty, the flickering glow of candlelight casting long shadows against the stone walls. The scent of incense and old parchment hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint traces of candle wax and dust. Daemonweaver moved through the corridors like a whisper, her steps soundless on the smooth floor. The priest's private chambers lay ahead. She could feel his presence, his anticipation thick and tangible in the air. He was waiting. She had seen the look in his eyes when he first met her gaze in the town square. The way his breath hitched, the way his lips parted, the momentary flicker of something dark and wanting in his soul. His faith had already been rotting. She would merely peel back the layers and reveal the filth beneath. The door to his chambers was cracked open, candlelight spilling through the gap. She pushed it open. The priest stood at the far end of the room, his back turned, hands trembling as he poured wine into a golden chalice. His robes were loose now, slipping from his shoulders, exposing the smooth, well-fed flesh beneath. "He knows why you are here," Lothenia whispered, her voice curling around Daemonweaver's thoughts like silk. "He has been waiting for something like this, something forbidden, something unholy." Daemonweaver stepped inside, shutting the door behind her with the faintest click. The priest flinched, then turned to face her, the chalice shaking slightly in his grip. His dark eyes roamed over her, lingering on the damp strands of hair clinging to her skin, the ragged cloak barely concealing her curves. "My child," his voice was thick, unsteady. "What brings you here, so late?" Daemonweaver let her lips curve into a slow smile. "Faith," she murmured, taking a step closer. "I seek guidance." His breathing grew heavier. Her fingers traced along the wooden desk beside her, grazing the open pages of a holy text. She glanced down, eyes skimming the words, scripture praising Amara's mercy, her light, her purity, a doctrine of restraint, of devotion. What a joke! She lifted her gaze to meet his. "Surely a priest as wise as you knows that faith can take many forms." He swallowed hard. "This is inappropriate. She was in front of him now, so close he could feel her warmth, smell the faint trace of salt and the lingering sweetness of the temple's incense clinging to her skin. "Inappropriate," she echoed, tilting her head, "or simply tempting?" His lips parted to speak, but no words came. Daemonweaver reached up, tracing a single finger along his jawline, watching as he shuddered beneath her touch. His resolve cracked like thin ice, the weight of his oaths crumbling under the hunger in his gaze. "Have you never wanted?" she whispered. His breathing hitched. "Have you never sinned?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he did not move away. His body betrayed him. Daemonweaver leaned in, lips barely grazing his ear. "What would your goddess say, priest?" she murmured. "If she saw you now, aching for the touch of something dark, something forbidden?" A strangled sound left his throat. His hands twitched, wanting to reach for her, wanting to push her away. She let her fingers trail lower over his chest, his stomach. "You can fight it," she purred, "or you can surrender." The battle within him was brief. His will crumbled. With a shuddering breath, he fell into her. His lips crushed against hers, desperate, fevered, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her closer. He kissed like a man, starving. His faith cast aside in an instant, his need exposed like an open wound. Daemonweaver devoured it. She let him worship her, let him drink of her as if she were the very nectar of the gods. His hands, once raised in prayer, now roamed over her with greedy abandon. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling with lust, with sin. And then she struck. Her fingers clamped around his throat, cutting off his breath. He choked, his eyes flying open in shock, the arousal in them turning to terror. Daemonweaver grinned. "Did you really think you could take what is mine?" she hissed, her grip tightening. He clawed at her hands, gurgling, his face darkening as she lifted him off his feet. "Your goddess has abandoned you," she whispered, leaning in close, letting him see the pure, predatory delight in her eyes. "But don't worry, I have someone else who will take you." Darkness swelled around her, the air turning thick and oppressive. The shadows in the room twisted, coiling like hungry serpents, pulsing with something ancient and starving. The priest's eyes bulged as he felt it, Lothenia's power sinking its claws into his soul. Daemonweaver pressed her forehead to his, her voice barely more than a sigh. Die knowing you were nothing but a weak, pathetic fraud. And then she ripped his soul from his body. His mouth stretched open in a silent scream, his body convulsing violently as a swirling mass of energy tore free from his chest. It writhed in the air, twisting, struggling, before being dragged down into the abyss by unseen hands. Lothenia laughed. The priest's body crumpled to the floor, empty, useless, forgotten. Daemonweaver exhaled, straightening, her pulse thrumming with satisfaction. More, my love, Lothenia cooed, so many more to take. But for now, she had work to do. Daemonweaver stripped the body of anything valuable: rings, a heavy coin pouch, a jeweled pendant that would fetch a fair price. She moved through the private chambers swiftly, gathering anything that could be used without raising suspicion. Once satisfied, she found her way to the temple's bathing chambers. The water was lukewarm, but it didn't matter. She scrubbed away the blood, the filth, the lingering stink of the town. The steam curled around her as she washed, the sensation soothing, almost cleansing, if such a thing were possible for her now. Finally, she searched the donation rooms. Clothing meant for the poor and needy hung in neat stacks, simple dresses, tunics, cloaks. She found a dark gown, plain but clean, and wrapped a hooded cloak over her shoulders. By the time she stepped back into the temple halls, she looked unremarkable. A woman, a traveler, a shadow, Pit? She slipped through the doors, vanishing into the night-shrouded streets, without a soul noticing. The priest of Amara was dead. His flock would wake to find their shepherd gone, and their faith would begin to crumble. Daemonweaver smiled. The work had only just begun.